Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again. And we're going to continue now with the Star Wars, the Clone Wars ongoing review of this final story arc of the final season, the Siege of Mandalore. We're coming off the back of two outstanding episodes, two of which many feel have been amongst the best of the season, and not only that, the best of the series, and many have actually gone even further to say these are the best within all of Star Wars content. Now, I'm not sure I'd go that far, but there certainly are high quality in their production and the storytelling overall here. So we have a continuation on now with an episode called Shattered. Okay, so we're going to go into spoiler territory now. So if you haven't seen this episode or haven't seen any of the previous episodes of the story arc, you probably want to stop watching now, go back, watch those episodes, and then come back and watch this review shortly afterwards. So I'm going to get straight into it now and try and be a bit more concise than what was in my previous reviews here. So we pick up shortly after the events of the previous episode, The Phantom Apprentice, where Ahsoka has defeated Maul and he's been taken away and imprisoned, and we're now dealing with the after effects of the fact that Mandalore has now been recaptured and Maul's forces have been defeated. Early on we see Saxon, one of Maul's soldiers, being taken away and captured. So we have the beginning scene where we have Ahsoka and Bo-Katan discussing the fallout of the battle, and Bo-Katan just reflecting on her abilities now that she's kind of fulfilled her quest for vengeance, and what's her purpose going forward. How is she going to rule Mandalore and restore the city back to further prominence, and how is her rule going to be different from that of the previous regime when her sister Sabine was in charge. And Ahsoka kind of asserts her that she'll do a good job, and she congratulates her on the fact that she was able to capture Maul, and Ahsoka says she learned from the best. So that was a kind of closing of the arc there. I don't really feel we'll see Bo-Katan come back in the last episode next week. So we carry on. So they show Maul being imprisoned in a chamber what looked similar to the carbonite chambers. If you go back and watch obviously they appeared first in Empire Strikes Back, but also there was a earlier episode, I think it was season 3, it might have been the Citadel arc of Clone Wars, where we see kind of Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka go into the carbonite prisons to go on the planet when they had to rescue a Jedi early on. So it looked similar to that on here, and I think it was created specifically for people with force powers or force sensitive, they refer to on here. So we see Maul get taken away on the ship, and then we later go on to probably one of the most interesting developments of this episode, where we see Ahsoka walking on a Jedi conference call between Mace Windu and Yoda, and this is a beat for beat almost exact recreation of the scene from Revenge of the Sith, where they basically reveal that there's a plot to overthrow the Jedi, and they sense the Palpatine's involvement in this initiative, and literally they take verbatim dialogue, and that's always great. And I think that's one of the ways they've integrated the Revenge of the Sith part really well in showing how this scene can kind of connect to the events going on in the episode here. So we have the discussion, and shortly afterwards we have a back and forth here where they're discussing what happened. And this is one thing we could query here, because Ahsoka doesn't mention the fact that Maul told her that Anakin was perceived as being the apprentice to Darth Sidious, and Windu doesn't tell her either that they suspect the Chancellor involvement in this. And it's one of those kind of plot armor or plot contrivances, isn't it? Because you kind of feel, well, if Ahsoka and Windu had just discussed with each other the plans, and they could have done something to prevent the fallout within Revenge of the Sith. Now they try to justify it in the sense that Ahsoka, she's no longer considered a Jedi, she's just a citizen, if you like, so they can't discuss the Jedi matters with her. Yeah, it was I could see what they're going with, but I don't know, I wasn't really convinced. Like I said, it was just plot contrivance for me. I think, in a normal situation like that, when you've got knowledge on somebody like Anakin, who is the perceived chosen one, and maybe there's a possibility that they could be actually against the Force or working against the Force, that's something you really should be telling the Jedi. Whether it's not Mace Windu, then she should have at the very least told Yoda. And you kind of think logically that would have helped maybe prevent events in the future. So that was one thing I just questioned on here. They could have told each other all their information, because at this point they're in the midst of the battle and they're trying to uncover a plot, right? So it just would have made more sense had they disclosed information with each other on it. And even Rex, and I'm glad that they included this, that Rex acknowledged to Ahsoka the fact that why didn't she tell them, and maybe people could say because it's Ahsoka's closest to Anakin, that she wants to kind of give Anakin a chance to kind of speak for himself. She didn't want to out him to the Jedi before he's got a chance to explain his actions and what his feelings are. So maybe you could spin it that way. So, okay, we go on to the next episode, or next scene rather, where we get on a ship here and we see Ashoka and Rex. They have a discussion back and forth on here, and everything's great on it. I love, the music throughout. I'll comment in a minute. But then we get a great scene where we see Ahsoka on her own, and she's hearing essentially the events of Anakin killing Windu and joining Palpatine. And at this point, I'm pretty sure now you're watching now, the events of Revenge of the Sith now. But yes, that was a great scene, because we know that Jedi, they have the ability to sense what's going on. If you remember in Revenge of the Sith, when we had the Order 66 sequence, we see Yoda able to sense what's happening with all the Jedi. So that made perfect sense that she could understand that. And again, her closeness to Anakin and the bond that they have gives that reason why she can hear the cries out on it. So that was a really great scene. And again, that's a really good way of linking it. And then of course we get shortly after the Order 66 part, Sidious giving instructions to Rex, and then that makes Rex turn, and then he struggles a bit to kind of initiate the order. Again, we could question the kind of way that events played out on there, because the soldiers easily could have just turned and shot Ahsoka, but no, Rex had to call them off and say that he's doing it himself. Again, you could kind of question, why would he do that? This Order 66, take out the Jedis any way you can, right? Why does Rex have to do it? So again, he struggles to do it, and he tells her to find Fives, who was the other clone, before he does it. So there was a great scene here where we see Ahsoka fighting off all the clones, shooting at a really rapidly shot sequence. And Ahsoka, she's swinging her lightsabers all at multiple angles, fighting off the blasts of the clones. This was great stuff here, really great. The way that the action was staged on here. So we move on, and they're chasing Ahsoka, and we find out that they want to execute Maul, and Ahsoka stops this from happening, and she frees Maul, and she wants to use him as a diversionary tactic to help her kind of escape and move around more freely. And we find out later that she uses the droids to access the clone reports to find out what's going on with Rex, and we discover, of course, that they were built in with this inhibitor chip, and it was initially set up with the original plan of being controlled or manipulated, so the clones basically didn't have free will of their own destiny, or their own control of their own bodies, if you like. There was always this preset program to get them to do whoever's bidding on here. So she finds that out, and then she manages to capture Rex, and she uses her force powers to take the inhibited chip from his head, and in that way that frees him off that control. And of course, if you've watched Rebels later, you'll know that they meet up later on, Ahsoka and Rex, and he's free of that inhibitor chip control on here. And they just reflect again. Rex tells her that yes, there was a plan to overthrow the Jedi, kind of confirming Ahsoka's worst fears on here. And then as they look at the door, they see the Sith, the lightsaber cutting down the door, which implicates that Darth Maul has somehow managed to get a lightsaber, or maybe his own lightsabers back. And then we cut off there. That's a kind of cliffhanger to see what will happen next, whether Maul will attack them or how will they escape. So that was really the bulk end of the episode on here. And I think overall it was a very good episode. I think if you judge it on its own individually, it was a very good episode. Most of the story beats and narratives, they made sense. There was a few queries which I'll talk about in a second. I think it was never quite going to match the kind of bombastic feel, the exhilarating feel of the previous two episodes, Old Friends Not Forgotten and The Phantom Apprentice. You had to kind of supposedly have a come down, if you like, and just kind of grind into the story and the characters, and kind of take a pit stop amidst all the action and the spectacle to kind of develop the events further forward. So I didn't mind that too much. So I think comparatively, no, it didn't quite hit the extraordinary heights of the previous two, but it was still a very solid episode overall. So overall, what was good about it? So I loved the music throughout. I just loved the whole musical score, everything from the beginning scenes with Ahsoka and Bo-Katan all the way through to when we see Rex and Ahsoka talking on the ship, and we see Ahsoka having hearing the cries of the Jedi, all the music throughout it. And again, it just continues this real epic, consistent tone throughout the whole episodes of really creating this cinematic vision. I'll keep using those terms of these episodes, but it's true. It's just really cinematic, and I just love the little tones and the kind of little sounds that you hear within the music. Just this seamless, really sophisticated and composite mix of just musical tones and feelings, just to really set the feeling that we're in a kind of critical scenario. That was all fantastic on it. I mentioned before, I loved the way the action was staged when we had Ahsoka fending off the shooters and the blast together. Really, again, great choreography, great action staged on it. And also, again, very powerful scene with Ahsoka hearing the cries of the Jedi falling as well, and another great scene with her and Darth Maul. All the scenes with Ahsoka and Darth Maul have been fantastic. They've done a really great job of developing these two characters and the dynamic they share. Even though one is for the good and one is for the evil, there are lots of kind of common tendencies between the two. You know, in another reality, these two would be working together. And again, you could maybe pick holes in this whole arc that plausibly we should really be seeing Darth Maul and Ahsoka working together. And I commented in previous episodes that it really should have been the case of Darth Maul telling the clones about their plan with Sidious, and then we could have maybe warned the Jedi, and then we could have probably averted the whole events within Revenge of the Sith. But that's kind of academic discussion at this point here. So the kind of nitpicks, and they are probably nitpicks overall, I looked at particularly the choice, if you like, of how they were going to introduce Order 66. Now, I know this was a big event for people who were looking forward to when we followed the previous two episodes, and especially in The Phantom Apprentice, where we basically shifted full on into the Revenge of the Sith and that story arc. So everybody was looking forward to see how exactly are they going to integrate Order 66 into this storyline. And it had much more of an intimate, smaller scale feel to it. You know, I thought we were going to get a much more of a grander sequence where we were going to see Rex and Ahsoka maybe kind of feeling the Clone Wars have been won and everybody's in a kind of celebrative mood, and then we're going to get a massive horde of clones turning, and maybe Rex and Ahsoka are on the escape. Rex is fighting the control, where he manages to seize control at the last minute, and then they escape. So I basically thought we were going to get a last-ditch epic action sequence involving Order 66. And this was a much more smaller scale representation of it. I also questioned the quickness of it, because if you look at it, she hears the cries of Mace Windu as Anakin is killing him, right? So we would presume that this is happening in real time, right? Those events are happening in real time as Ahsoka is looking out and experiencing all the emotions on here. So it was literally, I think, 2 seconds from going from that event to then Darth Maul giving the Order 66. And if you look at Revenge of the Sith, it takes a while longer, doesn't it? Because we see the anguish of Anakin, and then we know that Palpatine, he's scarred and he uses the cloak on, and there's a further developments after that before we give the Order 66. But the way this played out was almost as if Anakin killed Mace Windu, joined Palpatine, Order 66, all of that happened within 2 or 3 seconds after one another. So again, it's really nitpicking, and I suppose from the perspective of the show, it doesn't really matter as much. If you're viewing more the overall continuity and overall order of events, yeah, you might have felt that was a bit kind of distracting. But we had the Order 66, and again, Darth Sidious, he kind of looked the same, because as we know in Revenge of the Sith, his attack or his fight with Mace Windu is how he had that kind of misshapen, scarred look. But when we look at the Order 66 Sidious in this Clone Wars here, he kind of looks the same. His facial structure looks the same as what it's always been throughout the series. So again, just nitpicking on here. So I just questioned the way it was executed. It didn't quite have the bombast or the spectacle effect that I thought Order 66 was going to have. I realised they're showing it more from the Clone Wars perspective and the perspective of Rex and Ahsoka. I didn't feel we were going to get a more planetary spanning visualization where we see Jedi's from different planets like we saw in Revenge of the Sith getting attacked. They really kind of keep it focused within the Clone Wars narrative, within this story arc, and there are virtues to that because it's keeping it within that same wheelhouse. But if I mentioned in previous reviews, again, you're talking about these big, huge speculative events off screen, right? And again, just disregard the movies. If we were just focusing this on a show, or even if you have people, as unlikely as it sounds, just watching Clone Wars and never watched the movies or read the other comics or source material, when you're talking about these things and you're not showing them on screen, again, a person would want to see these events, right? They'd want to know more about Order 66. They'd want to see more the effects of Order 66 and the ramifications. This whole stuff about a plot to overthrow the Jedi. They'd want to see more how Mace Windu and Yoda are coping at that. They'd want extra scenes seeing those Jedi and what they're going to do to try and handle that plot. Do you see what I'm saying? So again, from a show perspective itself, you're kind of feeling shortchanged that these massive events are being told much more in a smaller scale commentary, if you like, as opposed to what we saw in Revenge of the Sith. And yeah, I appreciate again that they can't recreate the scenes from Revenge of the Sith. It's a bit unfortunate that they can't really show those developments even further. So again, it's kind of now becoming very much the Ashoka show, if you like. People have commented on this before this episode and before this story arc, going back to the Martez sisters arc again, because if you think about it, Ahsoka now has really been the dominant force ever since that arc, right? And as I've mentioned in previous reviews, Clone Wars has never been a story solely focused or dominated by the Ahsoka. You know, she's a very good character, a very strong, very fan favorite character, but she's not the dominant force within this story. It's always been about Anakin and Obi-Wan, and again, I'm kind of repeating myself here, but again, the fact that we're not seeing those characters, even Mace Windu and people like that, we're not seeing those characters more. It's kind of, again, becoming more, Ashoka is practically doing everything now. She's fending off all the blasts. Again, we could maybe nitpick the plausibility, the fact that she's able to kind of fend off so many soldiers firing at her at such a closer range. You know, we go back to Revenge of the Sith, we saw other Jedis who we could presume have been way more experienced than Ahsoka. They were getting taken down pretty easily by Jedi, but Ahsoka's able to fend off all these group of clones just shooting at her within close range. So again, you could question that a little bit, but yeah, maybe it's just the fact that Ahsoka is becoming too dominant in force. Again, she's the one that frees Maul. She's the one that takes out the inhibitor chip from Rex. She's the one that chooses not to tell Mace Windu and Yoda. So it's just very much becoming out an Ahsoka dictated show. Okay, and I think they're going to continue with that with the final episode. And for me, again, I'm just criticizing more. I would want to see more reference or more commentary again on Anakin and Obi-Wan and the other Jedi, right? So, but I think that's where we are now with it now. It's just a case of we just have to see what will happen in the final episode now. How exactly are they going to wrap everything up? What sort of ending are we going to have? I assume it's going to be a case of we're going to focus primarily on Darth Maul, Ahsoka and Rex, and we're basically going to see where these characters go, how they go into exile. I'm not expecting any kind of big fight sequence between Darth Maul, Ahsoka or Rex, because that just wouldn't make sense at this point when they're now aware of the plot and we have Order 66 in full force. So it just doesn't make any sense to have another big fight sequence between the three characters. So you're kind of wondering, what are we going to get? Like, we would presume we'd want to have a massive, spectacular climax to the show, right? And I'm pretty sure we're going to get a somber reflection of what happened, and I'm sure we're going to get other footnotes to what's going on with Anakin and what's going on with Obi-Wan. Again, I don't think they could refer to Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting. They may replicate another scene where we see Ahsoka able to hear the battle cries, or the battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and question what's going on here. Will she be able to sense Anakin getting turned into Vader, etc.? So how are they going to do it? Because we could say in reality they shouldn't really know about that, right? They shouldn't have any knowledge of what's going on in terms of Obi-Wan fighting Anakin and then him turning into Vader, because that's really now the last development we have with Revenge of the Sith. Now they could maybe refer to the Anakin killing the younglings, and maybe we might see scenes of Ashoka and Rex going to the Jedi Temple and seeing all the murdered younglings. So they could kind of have Ashoka and Rex following to the trajectory of Revenge of the Sith and seeing the events of Revenge of the Sith through there. We could have that, but again, how do they do the final battle, if there is going to be one, or a final fight, or a final epic action sequence, right? How are they going to do that? It's maybe it's going to be a case where they're fighting off a massive clone army, maybe taking on people who are innocent civilians, and maybe that's going to be the last in battle. Who knows? We'll wait and see. But if I was a guessing man, I'm probably guessing we're going to get a much more of a somber ending. We're just going to get much more of a reflective tone of the final arcs of Revenge of the Sith. They may do a jump forward again. I'm guessing we might get a scene between Ahsoka and Obi-Wan after the events of Revenge of the Sith, where we see now that Obi-Wan is taking those early stages of looking after Luke, and we might get a conversation or two between him and Ahsoka going forward on here, something along those lines. So that's what I'm kind of expecting on this episode. But again, just to close out, this was a good solid episode, nothing wrong with it in particular. It wasn't really going to hit the particular heights of the previous two, but it was still a very compelling and strong episode overall on here, and it will just be interesting to see now what will happen in the final episode. I do know, of course, that as we all do, that May the 4th celebratory date, of course, for Star Wars, and that's when they're going to release the final episode of the Clone Wars series, along with, of course, the release of The Rise of Skywalker on Disney Plus. So they're going to really go all out. So I'm sure we're going to see a lot of promotional material and trailers alike for this final episode. So those are my overall thoughts on this. I would, of course, review the final episode of the Clone Wars. Let's do it as I usually do, a season overall review, and of course I will later on do a countdown of what I feel have been the best episodes of the entire series. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you really enjoy this episode? Did you not expect it to be as explosive as the previous two episodes? Are you happy with the way that Order 66 was executed, or did you feel that they kind of made it a bit smaller in scale? Were you looking for a much more impactful, imposing visualization of Order 66? But let me know what you think in the comments below, and your thoughts on where the series could close out, how it could close out. I'm continually seeing and hearing rumours that maybe we may get a further extension of episodes, whether it would be a Clone Wars Season 8, or they may give it a further title and it will just continue with developments within the saga. We'll wait and see. But those are my thoughts for now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like and subscribe and try to help me grow this channel. Stay at safe distances. Take care of yourselves for now, and I will see you very, very soon.